So here's a tricky question. How much money should you spend on your first ever electronic drum set, given the fact that you don't know how to play drums yet? You're buying this kit to learn on, so you don't really have any set in stone preferences, and also, what people give you conflicting advice. One person that you ask, they'll say, spend between $500 to $800. Something like a Roland TD-07 DMK, or something like a Simmons Titan. That's the sweet spot. You get something that's just good enough to learn on. Let's be real, you're only going to be doing paradiddles and basic rock grooves for quite a while. But as your skills increase, and as you realize that maybe drumming is a long-term hobby for me, that's when you go dump all the money on a really, really nice kit later on. But then you ask somebody else and they'll say the complete opposite advice. Why would you want to suffer through this trashy beginner drum set? Go buy something super legit right away. You'll thank me later. Not only is it time efficient because you don't have to buy one drum set, then sell it on Facebook Marketplace for a year from now and then buy another drum set, doing twice as much research as you really should be doing. But also it's money efficient because you don't lose any money from buying the cheap drum set and then losing money selling it on the used market and then buying a more expensive kit. Just go buy the good stuff right away. At the end of the day, quality usually wins. Now, the reason why both of those pieces of advice make perfect sense is that they're both true. They're just true for different kinds of people. And we're going to talk about how to know which one of those cases you fall into. But also, I put out a poll on the YouTube community tab to see what the consensus was, and you guys have voted, quite a few of you, have voted on what you believe is the best amount of money to spend on your first ever kit. So we'll take a look at that as well. But first, today's video is brought to you by edrumcenter.com. If you're shopping for electronic drums, you might as well go buy from a store that just focuses on electronic drums. Use that discount link to Edrum Center in the description below. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover is what are the price ranges where you get the best value per dollar? Like you can always spend another $50 or another $100, but it doesn't always make sense to spend an extra $50 because you can do that forever. This was really hit home to me recently because back to back, somehow, I reviewed a drum set that cost $400, and then the very next drum set I reviewed, just by chance, was a $9,000 drum set. You don't really want to be on the extremes of whatever, hobby you're getting into. The value where you get the best value per dollar is usually somewhere in the middle or at the beginning of the price range, but not all the way at rock bottom prices. You can spend all the way down to $200 right now, but you wouldn't want to do that. You're not going to really get a great experience there. But that's a rant for another day. So let's talk about the questions you need to ask yourself. Question number one is, what kind of hobbyist are you? Because some people, they jump into new hobbies all the time. They're like dabblers. They're very curious people. They try out mountain biking 1 month. They get bored of that. They move on to learning how to cook. They buy all the fancy knives and cooking equipment. And then they're into woodworking for some reason. And then before you know it, they've picked up drums. If you're that kind of person, that's perfectly fine. But you can't always spend as much as you possibly can on every new hobby because you'd go broke instantly. So instead of spending, $2,000 on this drum set that you're not quite sure you'll play in the next 6 months, you might as well spend between $500 to $800 where you will get a decent little drum set that you can learn on. And if a year from now, 2 years from now, you're still playing it every day and you've sort of increased your skill level, then it makes sense. You've hedged your risk. You can go buy something a little bit nicer. So that's what I would do if you're the kind of person that, dabbles in a lot of different hobbies. Meanwhile, there's another kind of person that doesn't really get into new hobbies that often, but when they do, that new hobby sort of gets them in a chokehold for the next 10 years. Or maybe you're the kind of person that has always had the drumming bug in the back of your mind, but you've just never bought a drum set yet. You kind of know that this isn't a big risky purchase. You're not jumping into a hobby you just thought about joining, a month ago. This has kind of been a long time in the making. If you're that kind of person, it is more time and money efficient to buy something really good right away, whatever the upper end of your budget is. If you have $1,200, go buy that. If you got $2,000 and that's a comfortable amount for you to spend, go buy that. Because if you know that drumming is going to be a long-term thing for you and it's not really a risk, you might as well get something really good right away. All right, so the second question to ask yourself is, how big does this drum set really need to be? In the world of electronic drums, you can choose an electronic drum set that is really large, has a fantastic drum module, and is inexpensive. But you have to pick two of those things. So that means you can either have a cheap drum set that has a good module, but it's not going to be a very big drum set. Or you can buy a drum set that has a great drum module and has a ton of cymbals and very large drums, but it's not going to be cheap. Or you can buy a cheap, large electronic drum set, but it's not going to have a good drum module. For 99% of cases, that law holds up. It's kind of like the law in the realm of like laptops, where you can get something good, fast, and cheap. You got to pick two, if you've ever heard that phrase before. If you feel like you need to have it all, you need to have a big drum set with a ton of cymbals and an amazing module that doesn't require you to get sounds from a laptop, well then you're going to have to adjust your budget up accordingly in order to get that stuff. Meanwhile, if you're okay with trading one of those things, then you can sort of bring it down to a more manageable level. The next question to ask yourself is, am I okay buying a used electronic drum set or like a 30-day return electronic drum set? Because if you are willing to do that, you can either adjust your budget downward because you can get the same level of drum set for less money, or you can spend the exact same amount but get a tier above what you thought you'd have to buy on the new market. It can be a really good way to get better value per dollar. The thing though is that it's a little bit tricky because a lot of people are charging too much for their stuff on the used market. You have to wait around. I would recommend shopping for a couple of weeks at least before you buy anything, because a lot of times things that appear to be good deals really aren't, or sometimes, at least in certain countries, good deals don't come along that often. So I would wait, I would bide your time, and I would try to test these drums in person, because you don't want to buy something that is secretly broken. Or you can buy from a store that's, tests them and then sells them, like your local drum shop or, anything like that. Usually, if you buy from a local drum shop that sells used equipment, you are paying a premium because they do test them and they are a facility. They're not just a random guy that lives, down the street from you. You do have the confidence that you can return the drum set possibly, or that they test the components in a more rigorous way and they're not blind to the tiny little problems with the drum set that we all start to ignore because we own it. I would avoid buying anything that was used on the showroom floor of a music store because those guys are beat to death. I once did that once. I bought a KT4 that was just, the display unit on a showroom floor. And that was played so often, it must have been a high traffic music store, that some of the pads were broken. I made the choice to buy it though, because I just needed the module and the pads were a bonus that came along with it. So I still came out ahead, but just know that there is risk buying a used drum set. However, the return that you get can be really interesting. Don't really pay too much attention to what people list as the price they paid for the kit. This is because, number one, prices fluctuate all the time, okay? But also, there was a big price spike that happened during COVID because shipping container prices went up so high that electronic drum prices everywhere had to go up in order to compensate for that. Some people bought electronic drums at overinflated prices, and now when they try to sell those same drum sets used, they're sometimes listing these used drums for the price of a brand new kit that is identical to the one they're selling. Not trying to be overly harsh, but I just see a lot of BS on the used market right now. So there's deals to be had, but you have to wade through a lot of trash as well. Okay, so one last question before we move ahead to the polling results. The last question to ask yourself in order to figure out how much money makes sense for you, is this electronic drum set going to be the kind of instrument I'm going to be playing long term? Or is this going to be a supplemental instrument to an acoustic kit that I'm also going to be playing or buying in the future? Because sometimes people try out drums on maybe an electronic drum set, and then they later go buy an acoustic kit. So if this is going to be like your entry into drumming as an overall category, but then you're actually going to buy an acoustic drum set later, maybe save money and buy a cheaper electronic drum set, and then save your money for the acoustic kit as you buy later on. So that's my opinion, but now let's talk about the will of the people, the consensus. What do you guys believe is the perfect amount of money to spend on a budget electronic drum set? So according to you guys, it's $500, followed by $800, then $1,200, then $1,500 or more, and then in last place, I was surprised by this, we've got $300. The vast majority of people, 70%, think that $500 to $800 is the perfect amount of money to spend on a beginner electronic drum set. Now, of course, in the comment section under the video, there's a bunch of people making very lengthy, very well thought out arguments as to why spending a lot more money is actually ideal, and I completely agree for that kind of person. However, keep in mind what I said in the beginning of the video. A lot of people, they don't know for a fact that drumming is going to be a long-term hobby. They'll bounce off the instrument if we're being real. It all depends on how much money you have as well. If your threshold of what's a risky amount of money is higher, then go to $1,200 and start there. But for a lot of people, even $500 is a lot to spend on a brand new instrument, so maybe they want to start there. It just depends. To be honest, I'm a little bit jealous of guitar players. To get a really, really solid guitar, you don't really have to spend as much money as you'd have to spend to get something equivalent in quality in the realm of electronic drums at the sizes that a lot of people are shooting for. Anyway, that's, again, a rant for a different day. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Start a discussion in the comments below. What do you guys think? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.